there too. In verse 11, it says, I replied by asking him, what are these two olive trees on the right and the left sides of the menorah? Then I asked the question again, what are these two olive branches discharging golden-colored oil through the two gold spouts? He replied, don't you know what these are? I answered, no, my Lord. He said, these are the two who have been anointed with oil. They are standing with the Lord of all the land. Anointed with oil, Mashiach. It's the word for anointed. So we've got these two olive trees putting oil under this menorah. It's a metaphor. Now it's explained. Let's look at Revelations 11, 3 through 15. Actually, we probably need to read a little bit further than that. Also, I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, dressed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two menorahs standing before the Lord of the earth. So these two witnesses are the ones that Zechariah is talking about. It's a prophecy about an end-time event where you've got these two witnesses standing up, basically representing the assemblies. The menorah represented the assemblies, but these ones have the seven spirits as well, according to Zechariah. If anyone tries to do them harm, fire comes out of their mouth and consumes their enemies. Yes, if anyone tries to harm them, that is how he must die. They have the authority to shut up the sky so that no rain falls during the period of their prophesying. Also, they have the authority to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they went. Now, what does that sound like? It also sounds like Egypt, turning water into blood and smiting the land with the plagues. And when they finish their witnessing, the beast comes up out of the abyss and will fight against them, overcome them, and kill them. Up to that point, what happened to anybody that persecuted them? Fire came out of their mouth and devoured them. That's like what Elijah experienced whenever they came and taunted him, and fire came down and roasted them. And their dead bodies will lie in the main street of the great city, whose name, to reflect its spiritual condition, is Sodom and Egypt, the city where their Lord was executed on the stake. Some from the nations, tribes, languages, and people see their bodies for 3.5 days and do not permit the corpses to be placed in a tomb. The people living in the land rejoice over them. They celebrate and send each other gifts, because these two prophets tormented them so. But after the 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them. They stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon all those that saw them. Then the two heard a loud voice coming from heaven, saying, "Come up here." And they went up into the heaven in a cloud, while their enemies watched them. In that hour there was a great earthquake, and a tenth of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were awestruck and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe is past, and see, the third woe is coming quickly. The seventh angel sounded his shofar, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will rule forever and ever." The 24 elders sitting around the throne of in God's presence fell down on their faces and worshiped God, saying, "We thank you, Yahweh, God of heaven, God of heaven's armies, the one who is and who was, and you take your power and have begun to rule. The nations raged, but now your rage has come. The time for the dead to be judged, the time for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your holy people, those who stand in awe of your name, both small and great. It is also the time for destroying those who destroy the earth." Then the temple of God in heaven was opened, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen in his temple. And there were flashes of lightning, voices, peals of thunder, and an earthquake, and violent hail. This is just like what Moses saw. He saw into the throne room. He saw the ark. He saw these things. It's open for the earth to see this time. This is basically when the Lord returns. Now, I don't know how many have studied Revelations, but it talks about 3 sets of things. The 6 seals, or 7 seals on the scroll. And then the 7 bowls, or vials. And then the 7 trumpets. It's usually taught that these things are concurring, one right after the other. But if you study it out, at the end of each one of these sets, Yeshua returns. Well, Yeshua only returns once. The other times is in Revelation chapter 6. Now keep in mind, there were flashes of lightning, voices, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and violent hail. Revelation 6:12 says, "Then I watched as he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun turned black as sackcloth worn in mourning, and the full moon became blood red. The stars fell from the heaven to the earth, just as a fig tree drops its figs when shaken by a strong wind. The sky receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain, when every island was moved from its place. Then the earth's kings and rulers and generals and rich and mighty, indeed everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in caves and among the rocks in the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one sitting on the throne and from the fury of the Lamb. Notice they saw into the heavens the one sitting on the throne and the fury of the Lamb. For the great day of their fury has come, and who can stand? This is talking about the same event. This is when Yeshua returns. This is actually prophecies about the day of the Lord. It's mentioned in Isaiah, with the heavens rolling up as a scroll, and men going into the caves and crawling for the rocks to fall down on them. It's all through the prophets. Revelation just kind of puts it together and sums it up. The moon turning into blood, that's out of Joel chapter 2, I believe. But all these things are just taken from the other prophets. So Yeshua returns here at the sixth seal, the day of the Lord. He returned in Revelations 11. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of His Messiah, and He will reign forever and ever. And then we see the same signs again in Revelation 16, starting at verse 16. It says, And they gathered the kings of the place, which in the Hebrew is called Har Megiddo, or Armageddon. The seventh one poured out his bowl in the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, It is done. There were flashes of lightning, voices, and peals of thunder. And there was a massive earthquake, such as was never occurred since mankind has been on earth. So violent was the earthquake. The great city was split into three parts. The city of the nations fell, and God remembered Babel the Great, and made her, Babylon the Great, and made her drink of the wine from his cup of his raging fury. Every island fled, no mountain was able to be found. Now notice that was the signs it talked about in Revelation 6. And huge 70-pound hailstones fell on people from the sky. But the people cursed God for the plague of the hail. So this is the same thing. The great hail, the earthquake, it all has those signs. This is a sign of His return. So the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls all tell the same events, but they give a different aspect of what's going on. Just like you have a view into the throne room in Ezekiel, in Isaiah, and in Revelation. But it's from three different views, three different perspectives. It describes it a little bit different. This is what Revelations does. This is how it's laid out. Yeshua only comes back once. But the thing that we need to understand is the menorah, and it talks about the seven spirits of God, the menorah represents the assemblies. And then the assemblies are represented by the two witnesses. Yeshua talks about when you see the abomination of desolation, know that its destruction is nigh, talking about Jerusalem. I'll put this down a little too high. And in Luke 21, he talks about almost the same language. In Matthew 24, he says, look for the abomination of desolation. When you see it, if you're on the rooftop, don't go down in the house to take your clothing, but flee to the mountains, flee to the hills. If you're in the field, don't go back to get anything, flee to the hills. You need to be ready at this point. Well, in Luke 21, he gives basically the same language. He says, when you see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, know that its destruction is nigh. And then if you're on the rooftop, don't go down in the house to take anything. If you're in the field, don't go back. It's basically the same language. So the abomination of desolation occurs at the same time that Jerusalem is surrounded with armies, but it's also at the same time when the witnesses stand up. Because the timing of all these different events is, in Revelation chapter 12, it talks about a woman that's kept in the wilderness, where she has a place prepared for a time, times, and half a time. And then I think another place it says 42 months. It's the same timing as the witnesses prophesying. And what ends with the witnesses prophesying was the return of Yeshua. Well, it's the exact same thing in these other instances as well.